maybe it's time to completely overhaul what a max contract is. Like, for example, I think the 35% max has been proven to be pretty damaging unless you're like a first team All NBA player. But at the same time, it only goes to players with 10 years of service. So why are we paying players that are much older the highest amount when they're probably going to decline?
Yeah.
What if it's just like 30% for everybody? Maybe there's like other types of ways you could kind of do the super max, but instead of it being like, oh, you have to make All NBA by your 6th or 7th year, maybe it's like, what if you just get a bump for the year you do get All NBA?
He is an NBA salary cap analyst and the author of capsheets.com. We have the pleasure in welcoming Yossi Gozlan onto Hoopsology. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming on to the show. As we were discussing off there, a pretty busy NBA offseason. No rest after the NBA Finals with a busy just free agency period and then summer league. So a little bit of time just to reflect on what has transpired over the past month or two. So just to get things started, I want to kind of get your overall impressions of the offseason in terms of any surprising moves, anything that's going to catch your eye, or do you think things have gone according to plan so far?
I think everything's gone pretty according to plan. I thought it's going to be one of the slower off seasons in a while, and there was just not a lot of big names out there in free agency because most players are extending. The biggest surprise was Miles Turner going to Milwaukee, and what the Bucks did to make the cap space possible for that. But other than that, seems like business as usual.
Gotcha. Do you anticipate any bigger moves happening, or should fans just temper their expectations and just maybe wait till later for maybe any kind of blockbuster moves? Do you think that's kind of going to be it?
Big moves, that's probably it. Maybe I would guess at the trade deadline we'll probably have another All-Star or two getting moved. I think at this point we just look at smaller moves, and there's still some teams that need to do some things. Like I think the Celtics still want to save some money by moving Anthony Simons. The Nets still have a lot of cap space to spend, so there's still like some like loose threads, but I don't think it's going to involve like any big names.
And it kind of felt like a front-loaded offseason, right? Like the KD move happens even before the draft. Did that just kind of take the wind out of everyone's sails when that domino dropped?
Yeah, a lot of the bigger stuff got done pretty early, like Desmond Bane also.
Yeah.
That might be maybe the most significant surprise move. I don't think anyone anticipated Desmond Bane being available. And I was surprised that the Magic were willing to bring in a player as highly paid as him to go along with their other guys and what it would cost to get him in. So that was a really fun way to start the offseason. The Kevin Durant trade, that return, it dragged, the whole saga dragged since the trade deadline, and everyone knew it was coming. I'm a little surprised they got as much as they did, but that's also, I think people also like realize they really didn't get that much when you compare it to what they gave up to get him. And then after those moves, it's Miles Turner, and then the big buyouts. It seems like those were probably the big stories, the biggest stories of the offseason.
And definitely with buyouts, that's kind of something that's maybe a big factor when we look back at this offseason. And of course, with Bradley Beal, and then we mentioned what you alluded to, with Damian Lillard being bought out. How do you feel about the Bucks' decision to do that move? I mean, is essentially eating that money on their cap, is that worthwhile long term for them?
So I wrote about it. I think these decisions are mostly a result of what happens when a team runs out of draft picks to trade and they have a lot of bad money on their books and they have like no moves left, but they still want to stay relevant. This is the next step that I don't think anyone really anticipated. No one's ever maxed out their credit on stretches. This is the first time we're seeing it. So I don't think it's really gonna make them any better. I don't think it's gonna really make them that much worse. But down the line, they could prohibit them from doing certain things. We may not see it now, but maybe when they're trying to pursue someone, whether it's cap space or in a trade, or trying to fill up a roster spot within like an apron, that could hurt them in the future. So we'll see if this becomes more of a trend, but you need that combination of bad contracts and like no moves to make for you to do a max stretch.
I'm curious too, with your knowledge of the cap and the aprons and everything, and we can get into that a bit. But was it a situation in Milwaukee where, the gears had been turning for a while? They had kind of set that roster and then, of course, modified it, taking that more offensive identity, I guess, in bringing Damian Lillard in along with other moves that they made. Was that a situation where maybe they just weren't prepared for those cap rules and those apron changes, or just not set up well for a situation like that?
Well, I think that's mostly that the Damian Lillard trade went wrong. They
Hmm.
traded their last few remaining picks for him, and he makes a max contract, the 35% max, and everything depended on him and Giannis having a nice two-man game, and it never really took off. And then he also, on top of that, tore his Achilles, and now he's injured. So when you put all that, especially with the injury and knowing that they weren't going to be able to move him, they probably were not hoping to stretch him at all. They probably were hoping to maybe even consider trading him had he made it through the season. Maybe from there, break up his contract into multiple pieces. Maybe they could have, if Lillard was healthy, maybe there was like a multi-team trade where they could have still gotten Miles Turner back. Not Lillard to the Pacers, maybe a different team. So now they have to go ahead and do this. So as I think about who could be in this type of position, I think about maybe the Sixers, where what if Embiid just at some point cannot even get on the court? Then they might have to, stretch him. What if Paul George just gets to a point where, like kind of like a Bradley Beal type decline, and lack of impact? Maybe they have to consider him. So that's the only team I'm looking for. I see like potentially be the next one to do something like this. But otherwise, I think everyone's in doesn't no there's I don't think there's any team in danger of having to go that route.
Yeah, I guess no matter no matter how you spin it, if your max player, one or both, are injured, that that's pretty tough to overcome in the NBA.
Yeah.
No, true. And I'm just wondering, as you guys just mentioned, with Damian Lillard, Bradley Beal, and possibly Joel Embiid, if he does not get healthy, do you see this becoming a trend? Just in terms of just getting rid of players, if you just want them off the Bucks, do you think that's going to become more of a trend that you'll see within the rest of the league?
Just like I said, if you got that, like the Sixers, I could see them if, like, what are the odds that both Joel Embiid and Paul George are healthy enough and impactful enough to continue on their contracts? I would say it's pretty low that both of them, maybe one of them, can get back, can be on that level. So if they can't get to the level that they need to be competitively, then that could be something the Sixers might have to seriously consider in a couple of years, or maybe even a year.
Which do you think has been the most under the radar free agency signing that a team has made that's really caught your attention that no one's been talking about?
Oh, let's see. Under the radar free agency signing. Might need some examples. Trying to think who I think may have had a nice off season, but no one's really giving them the credit. Hmm. Um, Let's see. I'm trying to see through my teams if there's anyone that sticks out. It's hard to say. I think everyone's gotten pretty equal attention. Hmm. I just think Detroit, not that like I think they got way better, but just given their circumstances where none of their guys came back, I think they were just hoping to re-sign most of these players so they can have some depth and maybe have some tradable salaries into the season. And for them to be able to kind of recover, get Duncan Robinson and Karis LeVert, bring back Paul Reed, and they still have like a trade exception. They could still have another move to make. I don't think they get enough credit for like just how like that situation. It looked like they were going to lose everybody, and yeah, they kind of did, but they got some nice players back, and I think they should maintain the same level of depth from last year.
I wanted to ask you, Yossi, if with what you're seeing with the cap apron rules and these changes, that honestly, even as a pretty diehard fan, I don't think I could explain the cap aprons like to my friends very well. But what do you think the goals are in these changes? I mean, is the thing that comes to mind, which we are seeing play out, is the NBA directly trying to create more parity with the changes and these aprons that have been in effect now for some time?
That's part of it. I think also owners want to try to curb spending rules where in a perfect world, owners, like in the NFL, there's a hard cap and every team kind of spends the same amount of money. So for the most part, you have a certain level of certainty for cost control. Now in the NBA with the second apron, it's not like this de facto hard cap most teams are trying to stay under, but once you're in the second apron, that means you're very deep in the tax, and they changed the tax rules where it's much more expensive the deeper you are. So by adding more penalties and that the deeper you go, the more expensive you are, then on one hand, if you're an owner, that's great. You don't have, you're not going to be motivated to spend as much. But then if everyone else isn't as well, then you get the benefit of, you get the financial benefits, but also the competitive benefits, knowing that there's kind of an even playing field, so to speak.
So it's kind of like a way to inch closer to a hard cap without exactly getting there.
It feels that way. I mean, the fact that they had to add like a second apron, like a second hard cap, it feels like the owners definitely made a bigger push for that. And, hopefully the players can successfully not get, stay away from more apron stuff or a true hard cap.
And it seems like another outcome with the cap rules the way they are, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's almost a push against like creating these big three rosters. Like it almost seemed with what Phoenix tried to do. Obviously, there was a lot of other stuff that went wrong there, but it seems like with trying to have, Booker, KD, and Beal all on max contracts, that would have also been pretty limiting over time under this cap. Presuming that ownership didn't want to just continue to pay for that. With those added penalties, it seems like this 3 max option that we saw a lot of times through the 2010s is now sort of being, I guess, kind of artificially pushed out by this cap. Would you say that's a correct assumption, or is there like a kind of any sort of push towards like a 2-star kind of maximum on these teams now?
Absolutely. I think that there is somewhat of a mindset that they want the talent to be more spread out. And the the bigger consequence of this is, okay, it's one thing to curb the highest market teams stealing all their stars, or the NBA has been trying really hard to address that with the Supermax, changing the extension rules. But now you're getting into a situation where you're punishing teams for just drafting well. So this is what you wanted. You wanted teams to grow organically, keep their stars, yet you're making it harder than ever to keep all your stars if you drafted that well. So what it mostly is going to do is shorten windows by a little bit, where if in the last CBA, maybe you could have like a 4 or 5 year window potentially as a true contender. Maybe that now gets down to like 4, 3, maybe 2 years. And it's going to require a lot of strategy, a lot of maneuvering to figure out, like, a lot of maneuvering to stay, within your whatever pay range, whatever salary range is comfortable for the team. But also now teams are gonna have to time playing when they're gonna be in the tax, how deep they're gonna be in the tax, when they're gonna enter the second apron. Because the longer they're in those certain thresholds, the harsher the penalties get, and at some point they'll need to retreat. So OKC is uniquely positioned where they'll avoid the tax one more year, and then maybe they'll get into the tax next year, but maybe stay below the second apron for another year. So then maybe they'll have 2 years in the second apron in the future. Like, it's very possible, like, they can extend this for another 4 or 5 years. So we'll see. But in the previous CBA, I'm sure of this OKC team, they just keep it for like a decade. Just pay the money, not have to worry about your draft picks being frozen or dropping to the end of the first round. So it's a lot more sophisticated now, where you have to kind of decide how aggressive you want to be.
That you bring up the perfect example that came to mind, because it seems like OKC, because of their success in draft picks and stockpiling draft picks over the years, they're set up to be, as mobile as you could possibly be, have that flexibility. And yet, when you think of having to extend Chet Holmgren, extending Jalen Williams, all these things, and then having SGA on the roster, you've kind of played yourself into, because you've played the game so well and been so smart with your moves, you're now in a difficult position where you have to make a lot of tough choices. I guess it's a great problem to have, but it seems like because of the rule changes, they are almost being a little punished for their success, like you mentioned earlier in general.
Yeah, and I anticipate there's going to try to be some modifications to how that dynamic could work in the next round of negotiations. Like, a lot of people have pitched, what if you can get like a credit on the players you drafted? Maybe they don't count against the tax and apron, or maybe just like they partially count against the tax and apron. Maybe it's time to completely overhaul what a max contract is. Like, for example, I think the 35% max has been proven to be pretty damaging unless you're like a first team All-NBA player. But at the same time, it's like only goes to players with 10 years of service. So why are we paying players that are much older the highest amount when they're probably going to decline?
Yeah.
What if it's just like 30% for everybody? Maybe there's like other types of ways you could kind of do the Supermax. But instead of it being like, oh, you have to make All-NBA by your 6th or 7th year, maybe it's like, what if you just get a bump for the year you do get All-NBA? There's going to be a lot of, there'll be some, I think there's going to be there's going to be a motivation to try to change this, make it sense, make more sense for both sides. Because right now, I think that's like something that that's like kind of a bigger issue as far as like, okay, now we have these aprons, but when you have all these players making max money, um, is there a way we can potentially help out these teams that drafted really well, but also, make things kind of make the penalties a little more reasonable?
How do you anticipate league expansion and the new media rights deal playing into that?
I don't know. I haven't thought too much about how expansion will really affect it. Um, yeah, to be honest, I haven't put too much thought into it, and it sounds like it's being delayed even longer. It sounds like there's not going to get enough support uh anytime soon. So maybe that's something that happens at the end. Also, like that coincides with the next round of CBA negotiations.
It seems like, I mean, the obvious thing, I guess, would be that it opens up more max contract spots. Do you think that? I mean, I would assume we probably all agree that the league is deep enough at this point to handle, if we had, presumably two more teams and then two more max contracts on each of those teams. I think the league is deep enough. It probably would support that. Would you agree with that, Yossi?
I don't know, to be honest. I just have not like thought about expansion and how that would help. It's just we're so far away from it. I I
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to like give you a good answer on that.
Makes sense. I have a question about the media, the national media, and there's been a lot of criticism in terms of how fans are getting their information from the main media partners. I'm just wondering, from a salary cap perspective, in terms of explaining contracts, do you think that the media does a bad job, a good job of really explaining how these contracts work? And do you think the common fan, what are they missing in terms of kind of that disconnect in terms of the national discourse to in reality what is happening with their favorite players' contracts?
I think like most of the mainstream media does a fine job explaining this stuff. Um, and I like to think people like myself, Keith Smith, Bobby Marks, we all
Yeah.
do a pretty good job as well. But it's just still very complicated. Like for me, I study it all the time. I'm practicing it all the time. So for me, it's different, but I still understand. Like I remember certain concepts that are very simple to me. I remember how difficult it was picking it up at first. And like with anything, if you're not really practicing it, then you'll probably lose it. So it's a very complicated thing. It's only going to get more complicated. So it's an honor that it's like kind of my job to help people fill in the holes. And I don't think it's like kind of fair to expect fans to fully understand it. We can only do our best to help people understand what could come next. I try to simplify things as much as possible, and we'll see. I'm sure we'll get uh, a new era of cap minds in the media that can help make our jobs easier.
Do you think, just, subjectively based on what you're seeing, does it put any sort of like barrier to fans enjoying the sport, or understanding the sport and what could potentially happen, in that, most fans probably aren't going to do the legwork and, know the nuts and bolts of, the cap aprons and things like that. I mean, what do you see out there from fan understanding? I mean, obviously it's awesome that, there's people like you, Keith, Bobby out there to be able to explain this.
I mean, I think fans understand it much more than they reasonably should have to. The only reason there this is even a topic in the media is because there's so much information Like the off season is such an event in its own right. It'll often equal, if not surpass, like the biggest games of the season that preceded it. And it's because we have all this information now about how roster construction works, why player movement happens. So I'm sure if this information was out there 30, 40 years ago, it's much more basic concepts earlier on. I'm sure it would still confuse the hell out of people back then. So I think fans are doing as they're understanding it reasonably well. It's a strange thing that if it kind of is almost a requirement now for fans to like have some level of understanding, just to kind of anticipate what could happen, and make sense of certain rumors. But I think overall, it's well understood, and I hope to think people like me, Bobby, and Keith have helped with that.
No, totally makes sense. Last question for me. And for next season, what are you looking forward to? Do you have anything that you're really paying attention to from just a movement perspective, or are you just kind of waiting to see how things play out?
Well, there's always Giannis. I think that's still not I think that's still up in the air. I don't think, like I said earlier, I don't think the Bucks really got better. All they really did was, I think, get their Brook Lopez replacement. And like if you look at the Bucks roster and just exclude Giannis and read all the names, this is not an inspiring group. So I figure I would guess that he'll probably start the season with the Bucks. But you never know. Maybe he isn't down with this group they put together. There's speculation that the Knicks are not. Ian Begley was reporting that part of the reason the Knicks have that Mikal Bridges and Mitchell Robinson aren't extended is because they don't want to trigger the 6-month trade restriction that those extensions would start, and they just want to, like, just in case Giannis is available, they want to be ready for that. So there's that. Obviously, LeBron seems like we're at the beginning of a potential separation between him and the Lakers. Still very early on in that process. Who knows just how bad or just just how much he wants to leave, and it's going to be tough for him to get traded. There's speculation maybe he'll even ask for a buyout, which if you're the Lakers, that's not very helpful. Like that's money savings isn't really going to result in a meaningful addition later. Yeah, I mean, those are the big ones. And then seems like the NBA is pretty set otherwise for the time being. And we just gotta see. I think we have an idea of who the contenders are, like 3 teams in the West, 2 in the East, and we'll see if that's all true.
Yeah, can't wait to see how it plays out. Yossi, thank you very much for joining us. Can you please let our audience know where they can find you on social media? Again, any upcoming projects you have, and anything else you want our audience to be aware of?
Yeah. So you can all follow me on Twitter and BlueSky at my name, Yossi Gozlan, where I have salary cap analysis instantly as soon as transactions happen, where I hope to simplify all these moves, make it easy to digest. I have my podcast, the Third Apron podcast, and I will stream pretty often, just about whatever's going on around the league, and my newsletter, Third Apron, very deep salary cap analysis on there on Substack.
Fantastic. Thanks for spending the time. Truly appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on.